So last Sunday, I began to recount some of the places in the Bible that God has shown his greatness and his glory. And I began with the creation story of our world. And I wanted to let you know that I'm not picking these events that I'm going to be using throughout these sessions by chance. There are certain eras of the Bible that are considered especially important because of the events that made them stand out. And these eras are commonly called ages, or sometimes you can look them up and they're called covenants. And it depends on whose list you look up as to how many there actually are. The reason that they're sometimes called covenants is because most of them are signified by a covenant that God makes with man at that time. And the first biblical era, age, covenant is called the Adamic Age. And that happens from Genesis 1 through Genesis 8. And when we look at that, we think, boy, that didn't last long. But we really have no way of knowing how long that actually lasted. This age ended with the event that we're going to talk about this morning, flood. Adam and Eve's first two boys, to recap in between, her first two boys didn't work out so well. As you know, Cain killed Abel, and so the Bible tells us that they then had a third son, Seth, from whose lineage the children of promise, or the Israelites, would come. However, there were many other people on the earth. Now, there's lots of different theories as to where these people came from. I believe the most logical one is that Adam and Eve had a whole bunch of other children, who then had their children, who then had their children, and God didn't mention them because he focuses, throughout all of Genesis, he focuses on the children of promise. So he focuses on that one branch that comes from Seth and goes forward. And so if Adam and Eve had other daughters and sons and stuff, then it's quite possible we wouldn't know, because that's one of the big questions that always comes up. Well, Cain went out and he got married. Where did he find this wife? Well, it could be his grandniece, something like that. They could marry a lot closer to their family than, say, we can today, unless you're in Arkansas or Tennessee. And so, it's quite possible that there are plenty of other people. In fact, human population was rapidly expanding. I'll give you a conservative estimate of the pre-flood population is 4 billion people. Now, when we think of it, we don't think of it like that, right? We think there are about 175 people outside the ark going, hey, let me in. No. 4 billion people. Remember that people lived much longer, many of them into their 900s, and they had children well into their second and third hundreds. So those of us who had kids late in life, that's nothing. Right? So, up to 4 billion people, but there was a problem. Genesis 6, 5 through 8 says, the Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made humankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the human beings I have created, people together with animals and creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the sight of the Lord. Now, I must tell you, I can never even say that last part of the verse without remembering. I don't know if, Jan, do you remember a Bill Gaither thing that was Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord for kids? It was for kids, and it was a whole program called Noah Found Grace. And for years, my mother made me sing that to the kids, the main song in that. And so I can't even say this without even going back and remembering my mom having me sit down and sing that song. But if you look in the previous chapter, you'd see there are only 8 people. Imagine that. 8 people between Noah and Adam. So 10 names altogether. And Noah was descended from Adam. But then, I don't know how far you'd have to go back before you went 10 generations for us. But many of these people would have been alive, right, concurrently, because they lived 900 years. But that's all it took for mankind to make God sorry that he made us. One thing I wanted you to notice there is that our sin grieves God. Far too often I hear songs that have snippets that say, I sin, but it doesn't matter because grace is there. Yes, grace covers it. You can ask for forgiveness and be clean. That doesn't mean that the sin doesn't matter. It does. We grieve our Creator. It causes him sorrow. And when we say that our sin doesn't matter because we're forgiven, diminishes the importance of holiness. So God decided to put a stop to all that evil. Fortunately, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Let me ask you something I asked, I believe it was on Wednesday night, a week ago. Maybe it was this week. If you had to think of where we are at, mankind right now, with the sin that is prevalent today, where do you think we would rate on the scale? Say you've got Sodom and Gomorrah here, right? Where do you think we would fall? Man, that's a tough question, isn't it? It's bad already. We know that. And I remember, in fact, just this week I heard a radio person say that most people believe that people are basically good. At their essence, they're good. You know what? God found that not to be true. And if you have a 3-year-old, you put a cookie jar on the middle of the table and then tell him he's supposed to stay out of it. You'll find out just how basically good mankind is. You do not have to teach kids how to steal or how to lie. They learn it. But here we are. Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. It says Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. And then it says Noah walked with God. That statement to me is incredible. Because when I think of someone, I think of like Billy Graham. Billy Graham walks with God. You know, he's been upright throughout his life. He's made sure that he didn't fall. And so to me that says so much. Noah walked with God. Mankind was saved because of one righteous man. Whenever you think that your sin doesn't matter, remember this. Mankind was saved because of one righteous man. Holiness matters to God. and it matters in the lives of those that you come in contact with, it will always matter. The rest of the world around Noah was a mess. It says, now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw that the earth was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth. Now, I'm going to try to explain this. Some of you have been around, especially during Bible studies, I've explained this on the chalkboard, and no one wants to see my drawings. Sin, it's like a virus. In fact, I firmly believe that sin actually is a genetic code virus. And when it entered our world, it corrupted everything. Not just mankind, it corrupted everything. There's a reason why they could marry people closer in their family. You know why that is? Their genetic code hadn't broken down. For those of you that watch science fiction movies, they'll always talk about clones and how the further you get from the original, the worse the DNA is. Well, that's true now. We are not, like scientists would like to have you believe, we are not transcending. We're not getting better. Our genetic code is not getting better. It's breaking down. And it has been since sin came into the world. And everything has sin in it. Once it entered the world, it corrupted everything it came in contact with. You recall that God said, I'll curse the ground that you walk on. Remember that? He said you'll have to dig and there's going to be thorns and thistles. There weren't even that before. But you know what? God had a plan from the very beginning. I love that. From the very beginning, when He gave us the incredible privilege and honor it is to be able to choose to do right. When we chose to do wrong, He had a plan of redemption in place. That's awesome. One day, God will complete His redemptive work, and all will be as God intended to be. Now, you say, Pastor, that's all kind of, you're talking about this DNA thing, and everything has sin, and that sounds pretty weird. Let's go to Romans chapter 8. That the creation, he's talking about the whole world, itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. In other words, when we are free, finally glorified and free from sin on this earth because God has come back and fixed it, completed His fix, all of creation will be free of sin. Not just us. Decay. So when we are completed, when God is finished with His redemptive work, when Jesus returns, all of creation will be healed. In fact, after that verse, Paul says that all the earth groans as with labor pains for the return of Jesus. But at the time of Noah, God was through with all the evil. So He told Noah what He was going to do. In verse 13, He says, and God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. Now I am going to destroy them along with the earth. One of the most frustrating things for me, because I'm not the most patient person in the world, and because my mind goes around and around, sometimes I need you to tell me not just what to do, but why I'm doing it. In fact, that's my favorite question when I come into a new church. I say, why do we do it this way? But God, have you ever had God tell you what to do, but He didn't tell you why? You ever had God do that? He didn't tell you why or what was going to be the outcome of what you're doing. He just said, go. Kind of like Abraham, right? We'll be talking that in a week or two. And He just says, go to a place that I've got set for you. Okay, great. There have been so many times I wished that God would have given me a heads up as to what was going to happen and why. Well, I want you to notice here that God actually does this for Noah. He tells Noah, I'm going to do this. So here's what I want you to do. Listen, a lot of times we don't get that much information. It's kind of like when you talk to your kids, you say, I want you to go do this. Why? Because I told you to. Right? That's the normal thing. I'll bet every mom here has said that, because I told you to. But He actually tells Noah, says, I'm going to destroy the world, and I want you to build a boat. A really big boat. And then God tells him something else. Here's what's great. He tells Noah what he's going to do, how Noah is going to survive it, and then He tells him something else. He said, but I will establish my covenant with you. And you shall come into the ark, you and your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. This is why this next age is called the Noachic Age, or covenant. God makes a covenant with Noah and his family. If you'll notice, all the covenants that God makes with man happen in the same lineage. So as we look forward, we've got first Adam, then Noah, then he passes along to Abraham, and then from Abraham we had Moses, right? And all of our covenants, to David, still in the same lineage, to Jesus. All in the same lineage. That's the reason the Bible, all the genealogies, they're concentrating on that lineage. So God makes this covenant with Noah and his family, and He promises to protect them through the flood. He makes provisions for mankind and for every type of animal. He even has Noah stock up every type of food that is eaten, so that when they get off the ark, they can plant that again. Have you ever wondered why the animals didn't fight with each other? You just assume God, right, shut their mouths or whatever. I'm going to broach that in a little bit. But the amazing thing, God says, I want you to build this boat, and there's a whole couple chapters on how big the boat is, what wood, and all this kind of stuff. But God tells him to do this, and the amazing thing is Noah doesn't bat an eye. Verse 22 says, Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. He was obedient. Now, I know that there are some of you that just naturally are like that. How many of you have ever read Dr. Dobson's Raising Up Boys? Isn't that what it's called? And he talks about the two different types of boys you've got. You've either got the strong-willed child, right? Or the compliant child. Yeah, we know which one you are, right? It's okay. I saw Bobby looking down. Yeah, we know. And you know what you were when you were growing up. When your mom said, why can't you be more like your sister? You know why that is. Noah's character was obedience. Some of us have to learn it. Most of the time with a hammer on our head. We have to have it drilled into us. But Noah automatically did what God said. That's you know why we know he did it automatically? Because he found favor with God. The way that you find favor with God is to be obedient. Now, we aren't told here what the reaction of the surrounding people was when Noah started building the ark. And listen, a lot of pastors have started this whole thing like that area had never seen rain, and there's reasons why they said that, but we don't know that that's true. But Jesus did tell us that people at the time of Noah were going on like nothing was going on. They were marrying people, they were eating, they were drinking, until the floods began to come down. Now, for those of you that saw that debacle, which was Hollywood's Noah, how many of you actually saw that movie? Yes, started, yeah. I have to let you down easy here. There were no rock monsters guarding the ark during its construction. Nowhere are we told that Noah was a lunatic, although I would guess a really righteous person in that area might be looked at as kind of eccentric. And all of Noah's sons had wives, and that was a major part of the story. As to the flood itself, we're told that the earth flooded so quickly. It says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. So if you can imagine, well, you don't have to imagine it if you live in Southern California. We always hear about the tectonic plates, right? Paul's favorite movie is 2012, and she likes to see the big earthquake and all that. You see the plates divided. Well, this is what God did. He broke up the plates, especially the ones that were under the oceans. And when that happened, water came up from the earth at the same time as water is pouring down. So, if you can imagine if you could turn on your tub and have the same amount of water pressure coming out of your shower as you normally do. Have them both on and see how long it takes that tub to fill up. Not nearly as long as if it was just raining. I remember, we don't see that kind of rain very often here, but when I took the worship team to Santa Fe, New Mexico for a conference, we were visiting Santa Fe and we were walking and it began to rain. I had never seen rain like this before. We went under the eaves, and within a minute, there was water gushing out of the rain pipes in huge amounts. And the whole street was covered by that much in just a couple minutes. And so you can imagine that happening, plus as how often happens. I remember in Scottsdale we had a flood. It was raining and the dam broke. So you have flood water coming from two separate directions. It happens fast. The earth began to flood very quickly. And the rain continued to fall for 40 days and 40 nights. By the way, I imagine most of you know, but that number is repeated over and over and over again in the Bible. And the whole earth was covered with water. Now, I want to tell you that nearly every culture on the planet has a story in their history of a flood. That's true of Navajos. They have a history of flood. In fact, when I was on the Navajo reservation, I found shark's teeth on top of a mesa. How did that get there if it wasn't covered with water? This was not a regional event. It happened over the entire planet. Now I want you to notice something else. The Bible is also very explicit about which creatures died. 22 and 23 says, everything on dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, human beings and animals and creeping things and birds of the air. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left and those that were with him in the ark. So everything that lived on land or in the air died in the flood. What didn't die? Fish. Fish. They didn't die. They like water, by the way. So the fish didn't die, but everything that lived on land or in the air died. And then that day finally came when Noah and his family could finally exit their home on the water. And God tells him, go out of the ark, you and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, so that they may abound on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, and every animal and every creeping thing and every bird, everything that moves on the earth, went out of the ark by families. So notice that God didn't release them without giving them something to do. Right? They were to multiply. Noah then built an altar to the Lord and made a sacrifice of thanks to the Lord. And God promised not to destroy every living creature again, even though he understands that the inclination of the human heart is evil from the youth. And then God blessed Noah and gave him a new set of rules. He says, the fear and dread of you will rest on every animal of the earth, and on every bird of the air, on everything that creeps on the ground, and on all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and just as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. Why do I say this is a new set of rules? There's a word in there, it happens twice in that, and it's the word shall. What's another word for shall? Will. Right? It's a future tense, or from this point forward. You see? So it implies that this was not previously the case. In other words, prior to this time, the animals weren't afraid of us. Why would that be? Huh? Because we didn't eat meat. And let me tell you, that's a real bummer for me. But we didn't eat meat. And here's another thing. Why didn't the animals attack each other? Because they weren't supposed to either. We're told in the end times when Christ returns that the wolf and the lamb will lay down next to each other. Because everything returns to the way God had planned it. But here now, God says, okay, now you can have these things to eat. Now, it may be that the rest of mankind, who was evil in God's sight, were eating animals. But we had never been told that we should or we could. If you go back and read through the creation story, you will see, pointed out, that God only tells Adam and Eve that they can have all the fruit and the greens. And then God spells out his covenant with Noah and his descendants. As for me, I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the domestic animals, and every animal of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. God said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you, for all future generations. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth." So God makes this covenant again with Noah and his family. And he puts that rainbow up, and of course scientists, we all know why it works. But God put a sign there for us to remember. And this is the second time that God has shown his glory and his power on the earth. First he created it, and then he cleansed it. The Almighty God is so great that even mankind's nearly complete disobedience couldn't stop the plan that he has for us. That's amazing. How often do you remember how great God is? How often do you ask him to help, maybe even for just little stuff? I remember Paul saying that a friend of hers had a brand new car and it stopped working. They were up in Yosemite or someplace, and they weren't near anything. There was no cell phone coverage, nothing. And this was one of the brand new, really, technical cars. And she immediately prayed for God to send help. And this guy came and he said, "You know what? I don't know why, but I felt like I was supposed to come by here and see if you needed some help." How often do we pray for the little things? We think that we're only supposed to ask God, does that mean God is Santa Claus? Of course not. But God knows what you need, and he wants you to ask. His word says you don't receive because you don't ask. He wants you to ask. How often do you remember how great he really is? And how essential he is in your life? That's what these stories that God kept in his word through his prophet Moses. That's why they're here. To remind us of how great he truly is and what he continues to do for us. Let's bow our heads.